Welcome to the Dual Threat Sports Podcast. We're your hosts, Micah Wright and Jaden Lewis. And Jaden, some crazy NFL news went down over the weekend with Andrew Luck retiring.
Well, this is probably the most surprising news since Calvin Johnson retired. And before that, when Barry Sanders retired. Andrew Luck, he was a very great quarterback. I mean, he had the most passing yards at his age, led the Colts to the AFC Championship with a 55-33 record, 4,000-yard seasons, and he was really the leader of that team.
Yeah, he was the comeback player of the year a year ago. He's only 29 years old, but he's missed 26 games the past 4 years with a number of injuries, anywhere from his shoulder constantly bugging him to his lacerated kidney, and this year with an ankle issue that he said never got better. But a 4-time Pro Bowler, definitely one of the best at his position over his career. He was just a winning quarterback, and those fans are going to miss him. And they might have shown a little too much emotion with the booing. That was not a great look, but yeah, they're definitely going to miss him.
Yeah, this guy, he's actually a very great guy. He got his bachelor's degree from Stanford in architectural design, and fans have to realize that these guys are also human beings, and their bodies are just like ours. So fans just need to realize that this guy has a whole life ahead of him. And
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we put all of our emotion into the game and not really think about how they're just like us at the end of the day. And I wouldn't want to be playing through injury like he has. I mean, if I had just got married like him and have a kid on the way, I mean, I'd probably do the same thing. And it was really just a sad speech. But those fans, I feel for those fans, but the organization's very classy for giving him $24 million.
Yep.
And before we get into some college football, we have a word on the new delicious chicken sandwich from Popeyes. The sandwich features a buttermilk battered and hand-breaded white meat chicken fillet, topped with pickles and a spicy Cajun bread on a toasted brioche bun. With more than 3,000 restaurants across the country, there's no better place to treat yourself than Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen's delicious fried chicken, as they've been treating Americans for nearly 50 years. And we also have a word on the ESPN Fantasy app. So fantasy football is finally back. In just 1 week, the NFL is playing. And this fantasy app is the #1 source in the world for fantasy football with tons of information on players from some of the best analysts out there. ESPN Fantasy Sports is second to none when it comes to fantasy football. It's easy to join a league and create a league, and you can do that on the fantasy.espn.com or download the ESPN Fantasy app from the App Store. So college football is finally back. The dog days of summer are over, and Miami and Florida had a great game.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It's what the fans wanted. The game was close. It went down to the wire. You had number 8 Florida going against Miami, and it was a very interesting game. There was a lot of mistakes in the game, of course, but
yeah, scrappy defenses. You know, Manny Diaz now as the head coach is gonna bring the defense. But yeah, Miami I think has a bright future this year. I think whoever their quarterback was, I forget his first name, but Johnson, the freshman,
yeah,
he looked really good.
Started with Tate Martell.
Yeah, and Tate Martell, I mean, people thought he was going to start, but he seems like since Ohio State he's never going to be able to play. But Florida, I think they're a little too high on the rankings, but I could see them surprising a lot of people maybe.
Yeah, but as a Mizzou fan, what's happened the last couple of years, you don't really know. But either way, with the college football playoffs, which seems like forever away, we kind of know that Clemson and Alabama are going to be the top 2 teams, right?
Oh, yeah. Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa. I nailed that name, by the way. They're going to be the 2. I think everyone has them as the 2 Heisman candidates. They're definitely going to be 2 of the best players in college football. Georgia has a lot of people returning on both sides. Oklahoma, I think, is one of the most interesting teams. I really love their running backs. They have 2 1,000-yard rushers returning. Trey Sermon, who had over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. And Kennedy Brooks had 9 yards a carry, which I think is ridiculous. He also had over 1,000 yards.
And they also got Alabama transfer Jalen Hurts, who led Bama, I think, to the national title his freshman year, and he eventually got replaced by Tua, but he's a very great football player and teammate.
Yes.
Okay, before we go on our next segment, let's hear a word from Jimmy John's. Are you hungry but don't live in one of Jimmy John's delivery zones? Well, here's great news from you. From now through October 4th, people 18 years or older can enter a 250-word essay to Jimmy John's, saying why Jimmy John's should build them a house inside one of their 2,800-plus delivery zones. The entries will be narrowed down to 500 people, and there, a single winner will be chosen and given $250,000 to go towards a new house inside the delivery zone. Enter Jimmy John's today so you can win you a new house. So now we are back, and October is coming up, and you know what that means, MLB baseball. And with the playoffs coming up, how do you think the playoff picture was going to look?
Well, I think a lot of it is going to stay the same as it is right now. I mean, there's only 30-some-odd games left, but the Yankees and Astros are at the top of the AL. That's a very, very possible ALCS matchup. Then the NL, you have the Dodgers and Braves with comfortable leads. And then the NL Central and the AL Central gets real interesting.
And it's going to get real interesting going in. Well, you have the Twins with a 3.5-game lead over the Indians, and they've been playing great baseball all the way. And even at one point, Minnesota had an 11.5-game lead over Cleveland, but it's really gotten interesting. And then in the Central, it's also very interesting. The Cardinals and Cubs are going back and forth.
Yeah, it seems like it's that way. Maybe not so much last couple of years. Cubs have been they've had pretty comfortable leads, but those two teams, it's going to come down to whoever wins those series. And same with the Indians and the Twins. The Indians have stumbled lately, but throughout the summer they really just rose in the rankings. And they made some great trades to get some power and Yasiel Puig and Franmil Reyes that could really help them in a playoff situation. And I think also the AL wild card with the Rays and A's kind of trying to slide into either the second spot or maybe climb to the top. I think the A's have the advantage. They've played great lately. As an A's fan, I've kept up with them, and they've gotten really hot. So I think they have a better chance than the Rays.
And they also won both their series over the Yankees and the Astros, and didn't they sweep the Yankees as well?
Yes, they did. They went 6-1 against those two teams. But then they lost to the Giants. I think their bullpen got a little outworked, but they're definitely in the mix in the AL.
Great.
And before we get into some NFL talk, let's talk about Little Caesars Pizza. So with college football back and NFL almost here, Little Caesars provides a perfect game day meal through their Little Caesars app. Order any pizza and get a 2-liter of soda free with code FREE2L1. That's FREE2L1, all caps, with any pizza order to perfect your game day experience. Nothing's better than free soda, especially when paired with an extra most bestest cheese or pepperoni pizza that's already only $6. Download the Little Caesars app on the App Store, and don't forget FREE2L1. So, before we end the show, the NFL's almost back. We're excited. Let's do 3 bold predictions on NFL this year, Jaden.
Okay, so my first one is that Daniel Jones will not start a single game this year. I think Eli Manning will find a way. I think his O-line's probably a bit better this year, so he might go out with a bang. My second one is Indianapolis will find a way to win the South. The South is a big question mark this year, as you see Lamar Miller tore his ACL for the Texans, and Jacoby Brissett, he could have a breakout year. And then my last one is the Rams will miss the playoffs. After seeing how they performed in the Super Bowl, I don't really know how good they will be.
That's bold. I could definitely see all those happening. For me, I have the number 1 Falcons winning the AFC South. I feel like this is bold. Last year they went 7-9. They were really banged up. I've always been a big Matt Ryan fan. I think he'll have a great season, and their defense will finally be healthy. And number 2, the Patriots will not win the Super Bowl. This is pretty likely given that there's 31 other teams, but lately it seems like the Patriots are just always the favorites. And number 3, I think the Cowboys will miss the playoffs. With all this, Ezekiel Elliott news and whatnot, and the contracts with Dak Prescott, I just think they might be a little off this year, and I don't think they'll make it. That is it for us. Tune in next week for another Dual Threat Sports show.